Hi, I'm Jeff Wimmer from Studio Cycles and StudioCycles.com, and today in this segment we're going to talk about the differences between the Star Trac Spinner NXT and the Schwinn AC Sport indoor group cycle. In front of me is a Star Trac Spinner NXT, the current third generation Star Trac Spinner NXT, and I'm leaning on the new Schwinn AC Sport model. The Star Trac NXT, the Star Trac Spinner NXT retails between $1,400 and $1,600. The Schwinn AC Sport retails between $1,395 and $1,595, so roughly about the same price points on both bikes. The Spinner NXT is aluminum in the frame and in the bases and in the towers, although the handlebar deck on the NXT is cast out of steel. The Schwinn AC Sport is a steel frame, powder coated with stainless steel towers, and it also has a steel handlebar deck. The big differences between the two, the Schwinn AC Sport has 4.5 adjustment in the handlebars, where the handlebar on the Spinner NXT is a fixed handlebar deck. The Star Trac Spinner NXT handlebar deck has 3 basic hand positions, hand position 1, 2, and 3. The Schwinn AC Sport handlebar has a usable, comfortable arrow position. And also you've got hand position 1, 2, and 3, but you also have integrated positions at the arrow position. Roughly this has double the hand positions of the Spinner NXT. But the big difference between the two handlebars is with the Schwinn AC Sport, having that 4.5 adjustment on the handlebars, besides the ability to raise the tower up and down, the handlebar goes forwards and backwards, so you can fine-tune the cockpit of the bike. So if you're petite, or if you're a taller person, you can move the handlebars closer to you or further away from you. Other differences between these two bikes, the Star Trac Spinner NXT has single top load pad contact friction resistance, and the Schwinn AC Sport has what's called virtual contact resistance, which is a magnetic resistance assembly. The Schwinn AC bikes took the Kaiser M3 magnetic technology and they expanded on it, where the Kaiser M3 has 2 magnets. The Schwinn AC bikes, all 3 models, the Classic, Sport, and Performance, they use a triangulated aluminum magnet basket with 6 magnets. So the window of applied resistance from the Kaisers to the Schwinns in respect to the magnetic resistance, the window from easiest to hardest is double, even tripled in terms of your ability to incrementally apply resistance. So in layman terms, that basically means you get a lot more of the add a little bit, add a little bit, add a little bit when you're riding the bike. Both the Spinner NXT and the Schwinn AC Sport come out of the box with an SPD basket pedal. The Star Trac Spinner NXT in the bottom bracket, and I talk a lot about bottom brackets because it's a key component, particularly in a commercial setting. Every bike has a bottom bracket. If it's a bicycle, if it's a kid's bike, or a $6,000 road bike, the bike will have a bottom bracket. Bottom bracket is the bearing assembly that fits in the frame, the crank arms attached to the bottom bracket, and the pedals screw into the crank arms. The bottom bracket is the single most abused part of the bike in terms of energy from the rider going into the bike, through the chain or belt, into the flywheel. And standard bicycle industry technology has typically been the bottom bracket consists of bearings on each side and a spindle that runs through that the crank arm's attached to. And the standard technology is the end of the spindle is square and tapered. You put the crank arm onto the spindle, you tighten the crank bolts, and the crank bolts tighten up and stay on. If you don't keep the crank bolts tight, the crank arms will come loose, and in a commercial setting with these bikes, typically what happens is the crank arm will snap right off of the bike. So if you've ever gone into a class and seen a bike missing the crank and the pedals laying on the floor, it's because it's fractured or come loose from the spindle. The bike industry about 10 years ago changed to what's called ISIS blind technology. and the spindle that runs through the bottom bracket and rolls on the bearings is no longer square and tapered on the ends. It's uniform from one end to the other, and it's splined, so the crank arms slide off and on the spindle. You tighten the bolts, they never come loose, and the crank arm, it's impossible for a crank arm to snap off of an iso-splined spindle. From a cost perspective, the bottom brackets in the Star Tracs probably, I'm guessing on this, but I'm guessing the manufacturer's cost is probably in the $6 to $12 range for Star Trac to actually implement that bottom bracket into their bike, and it is proprietary. It's built specifically for this bike. The bottom brackets in the Schwinn AC bikes, which are iso-spline bottom brackets, the cost on those is roughly $40, $50. So it's 4 to 5 times more money to put that bottom bracket in this bike. But the liability is lessened because the crank arms won't snap. And in my experience with repairing these bikes, the iso-spline bottom brackets last minimum of 5 times longer than the bottom brackets with a square tapered spindle. So just to recap, the AC Classic has magnetic resistance. It has a fore and aft adjustment on the handlebars. Comes out of the box with an SPD basket pedal. It also has integrated bottle cages in the handlebars, same as the NXT, and it has a comfortable aero position. In the AC performance, the AC bike line rather, the Classic, the Sport, and the Performance, they all have that unique aero position. So if you want to work the core and the quads, you can get in the aero position, load the resistance, drop your heels, and really grind on the bike comfortably. The NXT is aluminum. It has bottle cages in the handlebars. It has friction resistance. And it comes out of the box with an SPD basket combo pedal. Standard warranty on the Star Trac Spinner NXT from the factory's 3 year, I believe it's 2 years or 3 years parts, 5 years frame. On the AC Sport, it's 3 years parts, 5 years frame. We sell the NXT and the AC Sport. We are the only destination where you can go to buy these bikes, and we actually pull the brand new bike out of the box, build it, tune it, and then repackage it better than the factory packaging, double box it. We extend the warranty for life. We do lifetime free parts replacement, which is all good, but the most glaring thing that we do that no one else does, which is priceless, is we pull the bike out of the box when it's new, like I said, and we build it and we tune it. And in my experience, and I've probably built, tuned, repaired, and overhauled and refurbished possibly over 100,000 of these bikes in the last 15 years. And I've never seen a brand new bike come out of the box and it work optimally. So we don't charge extra for that. So you can check out both of these bikes at studiocycles.com, and also check out our free bike buyer aid video section as well, studiocycles.com.